Hello and welcome back to Coast FC, the Canadian soccer podcast focused on all things CPO, Canadian Championship, and more. My name is Felipe Ojo.
And I'm Mike Rice.
And today we are going into match week 11 of the CPL. We are almost halfway through the season now. Just a few more weeks before we're at the halfway point. Crazy how time has flown. But we had some pretty big games, pretty big results. Finally, one particular fan base will be very, very happy after a long time of suffering. But before we dive into the matches, remember to follow us on all of our socials at Coast to Coast FC, as well as finding us on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple under the same name, where you can find our visuals as well as just our lovely faces there. And Canadian Soccer Daily, give them a follow as well, as we upload more clips on there. If you can't watch or listen to the full episode, you can get the little tidbits on their page as well. But before we kick off into the matches, I want to talk a little bit about some of the format changes that we're doing at Coast to Coast. Before, we were kind of giving a little bit of a recap, giving our thoughts, but mostly a sort of a match recap of what was happening in the first half and the second half. I think we're deciding now, Mike, that we want to go more into talking about the bigger points, the takeaways, since people can just watch the YouTube recaps of the highlights and get the sort of same thing. And we want to talk more about what these things mean rather than just restating, the events of the matches.
Yeah, and you can see us you can hear us getting more frustrated or excited by certain teams.
Exactly. Yeah. But so let us know what you think about this new format, and if you like it, and if you don't, and if you have any points that you want us to talk about on the show after a game, feel free to tweet at us, and we'll get to it, and we'll hopefully talk about it on the show. But for now, let's start off. We're not going to start off with the first match, because we're going to talk about the biggest match, and that was with the big first win for Halifax in the last game of the match day. So we're starting with the last one, and then we're starting back at the beginning, but we can't not start the show with the biggest match of the weekend, and that was the emphatic 4-0 win for Halifax over Vancouver FC. Incredibly, Halifax 2-0 up, Ryan Telfer with a double, got a red card in the 68th, and then still went on to score two more goals to make it 4-0 on the night. But while everyone obviously is going to be wanting to talk about Halifax, I want to talk about Vancouver FC first. Because when the lineup came out, I was a little confused about what was going on, because I saw three center backs in the formation, and I thought we were going to a sort of back three, and it did look like it was sort of a back three, but then we saw in the game Alan Enyu step up into midfield and kind of pushing Fry further up as well in a weird sort of like, I don't even know what formation it kind of turned into. If it was if it's still sort of the 4-2-2, not really. I don't even know exactly what it was. Myself and Alex Gonge-Ruzek, who were at the match, were a little bit mystified. But when you have a change like that, when you are trying to experiment things, obviously you want to try to find the best out of certain players. And if things have not been going too well, which things haven't been for Vancouver FC, they've been winless, I think, now in 4 matches, you want to be able to keep things, fresh and try to, switch things up, especially in a league like this, where you're facing the same opponent 4 times. You need to keep things fresh. But I think this was not the move, Mike, because we saw very quickly inside 20 minutes, Halifax just ran riot through Vancouver FC, and you could see that everyone sort of knew it. Afshin knew it. Everyone on the bench sort of knew it. And you could see that, within half an hour, Vancouver FC were already making a switch of taking off TJ Tahid, who, unfortunately for him, the young man was just getting destroyed down his right side. Just that left side was so dangerous for Halifax, and they just got pummeled in the opening 25 minutes. And I'm just curious for you, is do you see this experimentation as, obviously looking at the result, you say that it's a mistake, but beforehand, do you feel like when you're experimenting with a team like this, there's a balance that you have to try to find that maybe Afshin hasn't been able to find? What do you think went wrong with his experimenting in this match?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of like main things. It's not the time to do it when you're going up against Halifax, who are desperate for a win. Like Halifax are one of the most fluid teams. Things aren't going fantastic for them, but Patrice Geyser did mention in his press conference afterwards. I was listening to a little bit of it. And he just said, like, we say it's our first win, but also we're unbeaten in 4. So they've been trying to improve. They've been throwing games away late, and so there was something in there. And with all these changes, I mean, whoever was playing up front, and it was Telford today, like they were going to get space because it didn't look like the central defender partnerships, whatever it was completely comfortable with what they were meant to exactly be doing when there's players like Telfer rotating. I thought Bahia was excellent in this one as the start as well, like causing problems, and it just threw out the whole Vancouver sort of positional play. They just seemed so disorganized and not really understanding what each other's roles were. And then on the other side, that specifically Vancouver is like, as we said at the beginning of the year, they got a lot of players who could really contribute, and there was always going to be this headache of how do you keep them all engaged, how do you keep them all fit, how do you keep them all playing and competing. And it seems like something had to be done. Like you say, there's a 4-game really stretch, but it did seem a little bit like, let's just try and organize things and let's see if there's a different way of trying to get people in. It just seemed to be the worst time to do it.
Yeah, and it reminded me a little bit of 2023 in the sense where I felt like back then Afshin didn't have the tools, and so he had to experiment to see, sort of throwing at the wall what stuck in terms of, trying to piece together a competitive team with a lot of pieces that weren't at the competitive level. And so there we saw a lot of experimentation where he was playing a 4-2-3-1, went to a back 5, and then sort of changed different personnel, putting players out of position. Yada yada yada. You could excuse that because it was expansion side and because of the players, but now it feels like he's almost like when now that things are a little bit tough again, he's going back to that and be like, okay, let's not necessarily blow it up, but let's make some drastic changes. Let's see what happens. Let's try to make things sort of fresh, but going too far into the extreme. And I feel like exactly what happened in 2023. The team wasn't well organized. The team didn't have a set idea of how to play. There was no significant playing style that I could really tell. And through that lack of identity, through that lack of, real organization, they suffered. And that's how they got, caught out twice in the opening 20 minutes. It was both in transition, both off of, mistakes, and they quickly got punished for it. And then afterwards, we'll talk about the red card and everything when we talk more about Halifax. But afterwards, you are in that position where you are up with a man advantage. You are 2-0 down, but with 20, I think it was like 22 minutes to play. I was turning to Alex like, okay, we got a game here because I'm expecting Vancouver FC to grow into the game, push Halifax back, create chances, get one maybe early-ish goal, and then try to get a second and a third in the closing stages. But instead, they got once again caught out because they were too drastic. They were panicky. They were, it felt disorganized once again in the attack. There wasn't those passing plays that we saw from Vancouver FC earlier in the season. It just felt all a little bit too rushed, and you could see the frustration in the team. The referee, I don't think, was helping their cause with some of the fouls that he was calling and some of the, the yellow cards that he was giving out. And you could sense that the team was getting frustrated. When they were getting frustrated, they were acting out of frustration, and they were just playing so erratically that it kind of it almost made sense that they conceded goals, even though they were with a man advantage. So it was very
sorry, I wanted to jump on what you were saying about how it did seem to go back, and Enye coming in is a bit like Bakare coming into DM, like you were saying back there. But also, does this because they were doing that because they didn't know and they didn't have the players in they wanted? Does this sort of tell you Alejandro Diaz isn't going to be renewing? Like, he's not coming back. He's going back to Norway. Like, they're having to work out a way to play with just Moses Dyer up front.
I don't know, because I did talk to some people at Vancouver FC, and though they couldn't tell me the finer details, they did say that negotiations are ongoing and that Diaz has expressed publicly that he would like to stay. So Obviously, that might just be PR. We don't know the inner workings. But I feel like they're under the presumption that he is staying.
Okay.
I think it might be more of, if Diaz isn't performing, how do we perform without him?
Yeah.
Rather than if Diaz is not in the squad. I feel like Diaz should be starting. I feel like the chemistry that he has with Moses Dyer is really good in how they understand each other. But I feel like Diaz is still not performing at the level that a lot of fans were hoping, especially with what he showed a few years ago with Pacific FC. So it really feels like this was a kind of an experiment to see how can we play in a different style, kind of maybe Afshin trying to be a little bit more flexible, allowing some players to come in and to show a little bit more of why they deserve to be starting, why they deserve to be competing. You got to also factor in on the 21 minutes. Vancouver FC, I haven't checked the updated one, but Vancouver FC is like one of the least under 21 minutes played in the league so far. So maybe you got to factor that in. How can we bring the young players in, and they still need to perform, and if they're to perform, they need to play. And so there's a lot of factors that I feel like played into why Ashton had to switch things around. And I don't mind that, teams switch things around because you have to. It's more of the fact that it didn't feel like there was any plan really behind this switch. I think it felt, at least that's how it translated. I'm sure it wasn't the case, but translated as it was switching things up for the sake of switching and not really having like a set plan in place. At least it didn't look like they had a set plan in place. And as soon as they got steamrolled in the opening 20 minutes, they did put the pressure on, but then they got caught out, and then they got, it was the lack of discipline once again that kind of cost them even more. And so I don't really know what the solution necessarily is, because yes, you could say just play your best 11, but if you play your best 11 and you play with the same tactic, well, by the second or third game, the opposition is going to figure you out, and then you're going to struggle to win games, in the back half of the season. So you have to switch some things around. It's just, with such a talented squad, the fact that Afshin hasn't been able to find a different way of playing with different profiles in the team, I feel like that's something that he really needs to work on, because he's not going to have many excuses as he did last season.
Yeah, it's going to be tough. I think he's they're going to struggle with the amount of rotations they have to do, I think, and that's going to be something they're going to have to organize.
Yeah, for sure. But now let's move on to talking a little bit more about Halifax, because obviously this was a terrible time for Vancouver FC, but a wonderful time if you're Halifax Wanderers fans, because that was their first win of the season. And what a way to win, scoring 4 goals in a game. That's the first time in their club history that they scored 4 goals. And this was the first time this season that I think they've scored more than 2 in the game. So they really came in hard and heavy in this one to try to get this win. And you could tell that from the way that they started the match. I mean, yes, we just talked about some of the issues with Vancouver FC, but the other team still needs to be able to unlock those issues. And I felt the way that Halifax opened the match was really, really strong, and it kind of showed that they have been building confidence in these last few weeks, even if they haven't been getting the results. And we've talked about that on the show, that they're getting good performances, but they haven't been getting the results. And eventually something had to give. Thankfully for Halifax, the thing that gave with the results, they finally got a win, and they finally turned those performances into a really good result. It wasn't just a win. It wasn't like a smash and grab or like a gritty 1-0 or 2-1. It was a 4-0 blowout. And to be able to perform to that level in a match like that, especially when you go down to 10 men, like, that's super, super commendable. Did you see this coming when going into this match? Because it felt like all the stars aligned, because you think Vancouver FC undefeated at home, Halifax unable to buy a win.
Yeah.
Of course, it was going to happen in this.
Yeah, I think with Halifax, they've been playing relatively well in some games. It's just, I mean, there's been a couple like in Patrice guys at times. Yeah, the teams play bad like once or twice, but there's been games where it's just been stages of the matches they've switched off in and conceded goals and lost games and found it hard to come back into. And in my head, if this was played the other side of the country, I might have started thinking, yeah, like this is Halifax's time. They like because they just don't travel well usually either. Like, so to do this was fantastic, and I really enjoyed how they got a lot of pace going at the Vancouver defense, because I think that's what they would like targeting in some of these areas. I think Rocco May is quite he moves quite well, but I think they were targeting David Norman Jr., who's not as quick across the ground and moving around the pitch. And when you've got these runners going at them, just to tire them out, and then you've got players like Aiden Daniels on the bench and things like that. I think he was on there. You've got Caligari who can pick a pass, and if they can move the defense around, you've got players there that can threaten. I think that's just really, really well done from Patrice Geyser. He's really looked at what the weaknesses were. He's identified it, and he sent his team out with pace, which I absolutely loved. And gymnastics from Ramprasad.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think Rampersand's foot could have been any higher. When I watched that in real time, like I knew instantly it was a red card, and I found it hilarious that Rampersand, I think he knew too, and so he clutched his face and went down,
exactly.
delaying the inevitable. But and like maybe trying to gather a little bit of sympathy for the ref, but no, everybody in the stadium knew immediately. Like his foot was
just
way high up in the air, and even though he didn't connect with what was the player? Was it Vasco? I think it was, or
so yeah, I can't remember off the top of my head.
I can't remember who it was.
Like
but
we were saying beforehand, I've watched so many games of football.
Yeah, that's right.
2 weeks, the kind of play.
They're all crossing together now with this football fiesta that is the summer. But even though it didn't like have full contact, thank heavens for the player, it was very clearly a very reckless challenge. And when that red card flew out, like no one was surprised.
No,
but still, the fact that again, it almost felt like we've seen this movie before of Halifax. Have 2 goals. They're in the lead. They get a red card.
Yeah.
Oh no. Is this Ottawa from a few weeks ago all over again with Coimbra getting that red card? But no, they managed to actually overcome that adversity and be able to not only hold on, but add to it with 2 other goals. And you got to think about it wasn't just Rampersand's red card as well. They had a plethora of injuries in the match. Some maybe not real ones. I'm not saying that Jan Fillions' hamstrings might not hurt every now and then, but he went down a few times. And coincidentally, every time that he went down, all of the Halifax players went to the bench to get a little bit of instruction from the coaching staff. So, I'm not saying anything, but maybe
Callum Irving will be doing it the other way as well.
Yeah, exactly. It's just those little extras that happen in football. But but even still, like Zachary Fernandez went down a couple of times, had to be taken out. Julian Dunn had to be taken out early on as well. So Halifax, who has been struggling with injuries, suspensions, and players out of form, for them to, despite all that, still hold out the win and score 4 goals, I think shows that mentally this has been coming, and Patrice Geyser has been working so hard, and they finally have gotten their reward for all of that hard work. And I wouldn't be surprised if the plane back to Halifax turned into a party plane for the Halifax Wanderers, because that victory must have tasted like so sweet. Probably one of the sweetest victories they've experienced in their careers. But fantastic performance all around for Halifax. I want to talk about 2 players specifically from Halifax before we move on to the last point, which is Ryan Telfer and Dan Nemec. Ryan Telfer has been someone that Halifax have brought in We've known him from York 9. He is capable of scoring goals. He's not a prolific goal scorer, but he is
No.
capable of scoring goals. And so far this season, it hasn't felt like he has really been able to be that threatening up until this match. This is the first time that we really saw him be clinical and punish Vancouver FC's mistakes. And I feel like everybody in Halifax was so happy to see those 2 goals go in,
Yeah.
except for Christian Waleski,
Yeah. Yeah.
who wasn't even with the squad. I don't know. I don't think he traveled.
Yeah, you're
And
right.
so, great for Halifax
Mm.
to finally have somebody up top that can, score some goals. But for Waleski, it's a little bit concerning because he's trying to, he was brought in to be, the experienced striker, and he hasn't been able to
Yeah.
perform. Do
No.
you see Telfer now as this has proven himself as like you are the starting forward now up top for the foreseeable future?
Not really. The thing I find with Telfer is I think he's going to play a few positions throughout the year. Like he'll just keep getting moved around a little bit. I think he had a great game in this one. I think this. Looking back at it, looks like a game where it's like, yeah, I think the way that everything was set up was right for him, but I think he'll struggle against teams playing in different ways, who defend in different ways. And that's why they need to try and rotate him around. I'm not saying because he's not really a striker. Like he's not an out and out centre forward. He's a player who can play in a number of positions, which is probably his strength. I just think he will get used around. I think Halifax are going to struggle to find someone who's going to be a regular goal scorer for a few games on the bounce, sort of thing. I think they're going to have to rely on the whole team, or Dan Nimick.
Or Dan Nimick, which was the next player that I was going to talk about. But before, I mean, honestly, I don't mind that. I always think that I prefer a team that has a bunch of different goal scorers rather than only one goal scorer. So I don't mind if Halifax just consistently find goal scorers all across the pitch. And if that's Dan Nimick, coming off the bench, coming off injury, scoring a double and keeping a clean sheet, that's more than enough for the Halifax fans. Obviously we know Dan Nimick is a great penalty kick taker. The penalty itself, a little bit of a close call. I actually didn't think it was a penalty. I thought it was right at the edge of the box. But then I saw the replay and saw that he was like an inch inside the box. So I think it was technically the correct call, but it was so 50-50. But great penalty from Dan Nimick. The technique that Dan has is so infuriating, must be for the goalkeepers, because he hesitates that little bit so you can see the goalkeeper cheating, and that's exactly what he did. Callum moved too much to the right side, so it was easy for Dan to place it onto the left side. And the great part about that technique is you don't have to, place it perfectly, because anything to that side is going to be really hard for the goalkeeper to come across and save, because he's already off balance. To get across to the other side, it's going to be super, super hard. So you just got to keep it low and hard. It could be in the middle of that right side, but if you time it perfectly like he did, then there's no chance for the goalkeeper. But earlier, before that, the header that he had off the corner, really great delivery by, I think it was Probo. Sailing over his marker. I forget who it was. I thought it was Vasco, but it was somebody else. I forget who it was, but there was basically 3 VFC players at the back post, and Dan Nimick got ahead and in front of all of them. Which again raised question marks about Vancouver FC, but that is the kind of performance that you need if you are from Halifax, because that's almost like a captain's performance of like, you come on, you produce 2 goals, you're rock solid in defense, you lift the team up, you give that confidence, and confidence is infectious. And that's what it felt like for Dan Nimick. Is like he came on, and while usually maybe before Halifax would have given up the 2-goal lead and drawn or lost that match, Dan Nimick came in and almost single-handedly, obviously the team played a massive part, but almost single-handedly, it felt, managed to, get the 2-0 result and turn it into a 4-0 result. So it was fantastic for Dan to have that performance. But now, going into the final point for this match, I want to talk a little bit about consistency, because that's something that both sides have been struggling with a little bit. Halifax, since we're just talking about them, we can finish up. obviously a solid win. But the question now is, how do they build on it? Because they've spent basically 10 weeks just lounging at the bottom of the table.
Mm.
They have a lot of ground to make up if they want to get into those top 3-4 spots. How do they continue this so they can build on it, get a few wins under their belt, and get the ball rolling to catch up?
I think they just got to be brave, bold, and quick. Like there's so much about their game that could be so good when they're just really just putting teams under pressure and wearing them out. The thing I see with both of these teams is I think Vancouver, I think the way they've played is suitable for fifth place. I think like saying they could they can play better, but the way they have, like if you look at the games and their performances, fifth place seems quite acceptable for that. Whereas I think Halifax are below what you would expect from the way they have at times played with the ball. It's just been silly mistakes. In that case, I don't think that Halifax deserve to be above. Like, if breaks have gone their way, I don't think they deserve to be above Vancouver. I just think those two sides, they're in that little section below some of the more consistent sides, that things could be great, and then you're going to have a little run where things aren't going to be, and the same things round. I just don't think either squad has got it in them at the moment to be able to make changes, to deal with injuries, to get those under 21 minutes and still play to the same level each week. I think there's just going to be too many bumps in the road for both of them. Vancouver in the better position, obviously going forward with the 15 points, so they're in a better position for playoffs. If Halifax can get in there, then it's just the point of, well, we just need that little run of consistency in the playoffs. It doesn't matter like how it goes throughout the season. It's just getting to that line. I think for both of them, it just that's a realistic sort of aim, I think.
Yeah, and I think that for Halifax, it's confidence is the biggest thing. And I'm actually I'm gonna check right now. Okay, so they do have a few home games in next few weeks against Cavalry, against Valor, and then against Vancouver FC. Those are going to be crucial for them because now that they've got this win, they got it away from home. Now they got to transfer that to those home matches, because we talked about at the beginning of this the season, before the season even started, that home games are going to be crucial for Halifax because of the atmosphere that they can create at the Wanderers grounds. They haven't been able to do it up until this point, but now that they've broken that duck, and now that they got that monkey off their back, they need to turn their home into a fortress, essentially. Once again, they need to be able to win those games. Even against Cavalry, win or draw. Valor, you should probably be able to beat Vancouver FC. You would think that you have a good chance as well. You need to be able to perform well at home to be able to make up those points, and then try to get 1 to 2, an average of 1 to 2 points away from home to be able to climb up that table. And it's just about the confidence that comes with this team. And yeah, I think that you mentioned with Vancouver FC, my biggest concern for them in terms of consistency is their identity. I talked about a little bit, I think, in the last episode or the episode before that. They'll struggle to see what the identity of Vancouver FC is. And I think that might be because of the rotation and because they're switching things up a little bit too much and they're chopping and changing. And while I understand, like I mentioned earlier, why you have to do that, I feel like the manner in which Afshin Gopi is doing it is hurting Vancouver FC more than helping them at this point. And the concerning part, I guess, is that we're, like I mentioned, we're almost halfway through the season. We're coming up into 3 more weeks and we're at the halfway point. I don't know if it's still time right now, if it's still the appropriate time to be chopping and changing and switching things up drastically. I feel like the time is coming fast. And so now you got to be a little bit more subtle, and you got to really, hammer home these ideals that you have. And it just feels like that for me, for Vancouver FC, I'm struggling to see a real committed style of play that you can be flexible around, but you still stick to some core principles. So that's probably my biggest concern with Vancouver FC going into the next few weeks. But now we're going to move on to the technically first game of the weekend, but the second game of this recap. We're going to be talking about the other BC side who traveled to the GTA, which was York United hosting Pacific FC. And York United, again, with another really good result. They beat the BC side 2-0, thanks to goals from Brian Wright in the 37th minute and Mo Babuli in the 52nd minute. And it's another fantastic result under the new era of Benjamin Mora. It seems to just be really all clicking for them right now. Obviously, some things don't change. With a little bit of the disciplinary things, but we can get into that later. But it seems like, the new manager bounce, everyone talks about, it's like, oh, is it real? Is it a myth? Is it, it feels like it's real to me, because you see what York United have been able to do since he's come in. And it feels like there's been quite a few players that have been revitalized under Benjamin Mora. Probably no one more than Brian Wright.
Yeah, he's having a wonderful time.
He is loving life.
His little celebration as he skips along.
I know. He's just oozing confidence right now. And I don't know what it is that Mora did for Brian Wright. If he gave him like something different to eat in the morning and breakfast before the game, pre-match meals, or what it is. But Brian Wright is in the form of his life right now. And, he was a striker that for years has been sort of not deemed as a clinical striker for York. But this season, I think this season alone, he's outscored his previous few seasons with York United, which is incredible for him. He's just been on a tear in recent seasons. He's probably a Golden Boot favorite right now for most people, which I don't think you would have predicted.
No, 100% not. I mean, especially the way Del Campo's shooting at the moment is definitely the one in form. And there's not many. I mean, we'll talk about other players in the other games later, but there's not many players who are that confident in their finishing at the moment.
Exactly. So it's great for him to be able to do that and be on this goal scoring run. But overall, I mean, Benjamin Mora has been able to quickly put in a new identity, a new structure, a new formation, putting players in different positions, but it's all working out. Which is funny because that was something that I was just criticizing Guppy in Vancouver FC. But for Benjamin Mora, it's just clicking. And I think that's another thing that makes me think that for Vancouver, it's a matter of execution. And it's how to do it. Because when I see York United play, I can very clearly see what Benjamin Mora is trying to do. They're really well organized defensively. And then in the attack, they're getting into these attacking spaces in between the defense. And they're having the composure to be able to create those chances, whether it's out wide or in the half spaces in and around the box, and be able to threaten, not just in possession, but also in transition. And so it feels like a really well-rounded style of play from York United. And you've seen players that have really thrived under that. This game, they didn't have Noah Batne, they didn't have Juan Cordova. We saw Elijah Adekugbi start at center back. And we saw Botello be played, as well as Martinez is started as well in that midfield.
Martinez was really good,
fantastic, and he's a player that I don't think we've really seen beforehand play that advanced. But in this week, in this game, he was such a good outlet for the attack. He was finding those half spaces, helping to pull apart that defense, and it was just a breath of fresh air for people who were watching, York United before under Martin Nash. What did you think about this game? I thought this was the epitome of the new Benjamin Mora ball.
Yeah, I like what you say. Obviously, with the changes that Vancouver made, it seemed like let's try this and we'll see if this gets a good result. Whereas Benjamin Mora's coming and going, we're changing this. This is why, and this is why it's going to work for us. And this is what you have to do in each role. And so he's come in. It's the difference of changing something changing your own tactics to coming in and changing the tactics of a club from a different manager. Because it's just he set it up. They say coaching the defending part is a little bit easier than coaching the attacking part and winning games and scoring goals. But that's where you've got to start. Like, first of all, you've got to make your team hard to beat, and then you've got to make your team one that's going to go and win. And he's doing that really well. He's really, he just seems to have this aura of a manager that's got the full backing and the full buy-in of a team. He seems like he's someone who's had a look at what the opposition is like across the CPL and decided, right, with this group of players that I can fit them into the system I want to play, and I think we can have success. And so far, so good.
Yeah, so far so good, because we're just seeing a new lease on life for York United, and I think it's fantastic for the club. Obviously, they still have some work to do.
Yeah, it's not a full new lease of life, is it?
Yeah,
Some
it's not
people
a
are
full
stuck in
new
their
lease
old
on life
ways.
because we saw a little bit of shades of the York United that we all knew and love, of Richie's red card literally 1 minute after scoring. They had a little drinks break. You would think that Richie would be like, "Okay, I'm cooling off. You know, we're in the lead. Everything's rosy," and then in the middle of the field, Sean Young, dirty.
Wasn't that? He's broken up. He's just wound him up. It's just, I'll take you.
Literally wound him up, literally, like he wound him up like a yo-yo.
Yeah.
Just turned him around. Yeah. But then Richie just lost the plot, saw red, and pushed him way too high, like around the neck and face area. When you do that aggressively, you're begging for the referee to give you a red card.
Yeah, and he's reacting like someone who's been two-footed when someone's just pulled you over. Like, I know it's annoying, you want to attack, but that's going to happen in games. People are going to slow down the game and take a yellow if the other team's on top. Like, you can't, like, if that's how you're going to react, you're going to be doing this. You're going to get a few more red cards throughout the season.
Exactly, and like, it's going to be tough for Benjamin Mora, because from what I've seen, he's not like a coach that's like super loud and like is a stickler and is, you know, not aggressive, but is assertive and things like that. Like, from what I've seen, he is someone that is more calculated, more analytic. He's still passionate. You can see that. He's, you know, obviously he's Mexican. He has to be. But it's going to be interesting to see how he deals with disciplinary issues, because it's something that we've talked about since we've started the show, that with York United, that it's oftentimes they shoot themselves in the foot because of their own disciplinary issues, of players losing their heads, and it became almost like a mob mentality of us against the world. I wonder with Benjamin Mora if he's going to try to change the narrative of that and sort of change the mentality, because even though in this game, thankfully, it didn't cost them the result, had Pacific been more clinical, which we will talk about next, it could very easily been a match where they would have thrown it away. So how do you think Benjamin Mora is going to be able to deal with this? Is it literally just a case of maybe in the summer, Richie, you've been great, but you're too much of a hothead, we have to let you go? Or is there a way that you think he can reform the mentality of certain players in the club overall?
He's got work to do with a couple of these players. I think, especially how Richie seems quite important in the front line for his speed and movement, which gives Brian Wright some of this space. So it's not like you can just quickly chuck in Mo Babuli, like, who came back and got a goal. You can't throw him in and expect him to do the exact same job as Richie. He's a different type of player. Does that work? Is that like, so he's got some work to do to decide how he deals with that. But I mean, if I was him, I'd just, there's new owners in. They've probably got a little bit of money, like not like bottomless pockets, but I just get someone else in. I couldn't be bothered with it if I was him.
Yeah, at a certain point, players are players, and you know, you can't expect them to, you know, have a sort of midlife crisis and completely change who they are on the drop of a dime. So maybe that'll be the answer. I mean, Richie's a fantastic player, but yeah, if he's going to get red cards, and same with Mo and a couple of other players that are usually good for silly red cards for dissent or for violent conduct, then you might want to think about the long term. But overall, though, fantastic match from York United, not just and when they were leading, but after the red card, to be able to see out the rest of the match and not only see it out, but get a second, and Mobabuli, a really good counter-attacking transition goal, shows that they can be dangerous in different scenarios and shows that they're moving in the right direction. So exciting if you're a York United fan. We will talk a little bit about the off-the-field stuff about them in a bit, but we want to talk about first Pacific. Because as we mentioned, this could have been a very different game had Pacific brought their shooting boots to the pitch. Instead, they probably left it in the plane. If not, they left it back in Victoria because it was.
No, it's not there either.
It's not.
They lost them.
It got lost in the mail.
It's we talk about how Austin Ricci should be embarrassed for his reaction. The Pacific attack should just be embarrassed, full stop, at the moment, for the way they're playing. It's awful. It's really hard to watch.
Yeah, you see the amount of chances they had. Hurd had chances. Rian Moore had a clear-cut chance in the 58th minute, and just the stab of the ball that he did towards the near post from Rian Moore was just it felt like panic. It felt desperate.
Yeah, there's just no confidence. It's just stick out. I've got here 19 shots, 2 on target. You're like Josh Hurd had another one.
Zanata had one.
Yeah, like both Reed and Moore, that one you mentioned, are there ready. Like, and Reed goes for it. Moore goes for it. Maybe Reed was in a better position, but I can't imagine he's screaming, saying "It's mine, it's mine." Like, it's just like they're really going to struggle. They're the team that's going to that really needs to be concerned about the likes of Halifax and Cavalry, especially fighting their way up to get back up the table from where they are, because you can't score, you're not going to win any games.
Very true. Very true. And the biggest thing for me is like Rian Moore. Okay, you can say that he's been away for a few weeks, and so he needs to get back into it. But if he's not doing it, Hurd and Zanata aren't getting the goals either.
No.
So where are the goals going to be coming from Pacific? Because you
TMG
don't have a Manny Aparicio anymore. What?
They need TMG to step up again from corner kicks and things like that.
Honestly, back scoring. Because last season when they had Manny Aparicio, he was always good to pop up with a goal because of the quality that he is, the determination that he has. They don't have that anymore. Well, they still have a good midfield. That little bit of goal scoring determination from a midfielder isn't really there. You saw Stefan Yates try to do that a little bit in this game in the last couple of games, and this game as well. He had a sort of a half chance that he kind of spurned wide as well. But it feels like the attack is it's not even flat. It's at times it feels like it's non-existent in terms of actually feeling dangerous and lethal. There was a few times where like I saw Pacific have a good chance, but I didn't have any confidence in them being able to finish it off. And the fact that they had, again, similar to Vancouver FC, a man advantage, and they weren't able to turn it around, and instead they conceded. It's really concerning, and I've just realized that both of the BC sides did the same thing.
Not a good weekend for the West Coast.
Not a good week for us in the West Coast here. Apparently, we played better against 11 men than we do 10. But again, they were losing before they got the red card anyway, so maybe not. Maybe they just can't play well right now at all. Whether it's 10, 9, 8, 7, who cares? But yeah, just concerning from the attacking point of view for Pacific. And even you look at defensively, the thing that they're most well known about this season hasn't been all that great as of late as well, especially in this match. They were way too passive for the first goal, and they were way too passive for the first half. Honestly.
You saw them going out to press and then stop 2 yards from the player, and you've rushed up and then you just watch him and let him move. At no point did the York players feel like at times they were going to get close down. They knew, okay, well, he's coming, but he's just blocking off the straight pass line. We'll move across and see what happens. They just don't look like a team that's got any confidence at all. They're just like fulfilling certain roles, and we'll see what happens. And there's just nothing in it at the moment in Pacific. It's just really, they're a really hard watch, and they need a big change somehow. Don't know how.
But they do need a big change. So not like you mentioned, they will sink down the table if they
Mm,
cannot fix these issues in the attack. And I don't know if it means trying to find another player to bring in a fresh spark, a fresh idea, before the transfer window ends. But you need something to be able to get this team
mm.
to be back firing, because defensively they've been good, but if you don't score goals, like you mentioned, Mike, you're not going to win games, and
No.
that's going to cost them if they don't keep going. But now, the last point that I want to talk about was about York, because, as we mentioned, fantastic performances so far in under Benjamin Mora, but still the crowd hasn't been emulating this
Mm.
turnaround for York, because it's still quite small and sparse. And it's a little bit concerning, because you would think as they play better football, more people will come to watch, but it hasn't really translated all that much. And I'm curious to think of, like, what can the club do off the pitch to be able to get more people in, now that they can say, hey, look, we're playing good football.
Yeah, and that's going to, like, the Pasquale brothers knew they had a big job on their hands, both on and off the pitch. They've made a really good call with the manager, it looks like, in the early stages. Now it's going to be looking at ways to try and get people noticing this team. And I think an update on the stadium, like you've got in the notes there, like they need something to start selling to people to say come along, because I think there was there was less than 1,000 people at that game with Pacific. So there's plenty of people, massive amounts of people. York haven't had the biggest crowds over the years, like over last season, especially. But there's people that just aren't coming now, and they need a reason to get back there, and they need to sort of liven it up, and they need to have like a bit of a new product to sort of tempt people back in. And I think it's just going to be one of those things that's going to be really, really tricky in such a competitive market. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see what they can do, but I can't imagine it's going to change. It's not going to change overnight, anyway.
Yeah, no, it's not going to change overnight. I think they probably do have plans in place.
Yeah.
Hopefully, this is not going to be the norm moving forward. I think, yeah, having an update on the stadium will be massive as an important factor, because if they can find a new place where they can truly call home, not just the university stadium, but a proper stadium for themselves, where they can market towards people near that stadium, whether it's in a different city outside of North York, whether it's maybe slightly outside of Toronto itself, might be useful, going to maybe a Etobicoke or Newmarket or something like that, just pushing outside of those boundaries to be able to find your own identity. Because the issues that I see here in BC and Vancouver with teams like Vancouver FC is that you're already in a saturated sports market. And that's in Vancouver. Toronto, it's the issue multiplies by 5, because of how big the city is, and there's so much around it. It's not just Toronto itself, but it's outside of Toronto as well, like Hamilton, and you got other hockey teams around the GTA as well. So for them, I think it'll be very important to find where they can call home, where you can have that middle ground of keeping the fan base that was in Toronto or near Toronto, while still finding more people that maybe aren't willing to, make the drive to go see Toronto FC, and they would much rather see a team that's a little bit closer to them, because the
Yeah.
traffic in Toronto is terrible, especially if you're going down the DVP. So maybe that's the way that they go forward. But yeah, they need to focus on marketing and growing the fan base, because they're playing too well now to have such a small crowd. So hopefully we see
Yeah.
more people turn up. And if you are in the area, please go watch a York United game. They could use all the support they need. Plus,
Yeah.
you'll hopefully watch some pretty good football along the way as well. Now let's move on to the third game, which was Cavalry FC against Atletico Ottawa. And could you believe it? A game with Cavalry ending in yet another draw.
Yeah.
1-1 the final score, an early goal for Tobias Warschewski in the second, before Alberto Zapater leveled it up in the 39th minute. I think the biggest point to talk about is Cavalry FC. They are officially the drawables.
Yeah.
Like the Invincibles. They are
Yeah.
the drawables because that is their 8th draw of the season, twice as much as the next highest team. They have tied the record, their own record, for draws in a season. The last time they did this was in 2021, and that 8th draw came in the 24th match week. We are in the
And then half the
11th
time.
match week. They are on course to having a record-setting amount of draws right now, which is definitely what they don't want. They want to turn
Yeah.
these draws into more wins. And it's hard to point out many faults the Cavalry have had in these last few weeks, besides they just aren't scoring the goals. Because
Yeah.
you look at their defense, and their defense is actually quite solid. And you could see it in this match, it was quite solid. Aside from that hiccup from Kabsa that led to the Zapatero equalizer, they were quite well organized in the defense, and they
Yeah.
have been. They have the lowest amount of XGA per 90 in the league. They have faced the least amount of shots as well, I believe. So they have a good defensive structure, but just the attack is flat. It feels like
Yeah.
Cavalry are struggling to find that kind of creation.
But it's been a year and a half of this now, and they won the regular season last year, and they don't score huge amounts of goals, and they rely on their defense. There just needs to be maybe. I just don't know if they want to be as aggressive going forward, because there's the concern it would affect the defense and how strong they are like against the ball. They switch things up a little bit. I think like Warschewski's a fantastic player, and I'm kind of jumping onto our third point because I think they kind of mix. If that's all right.
Yeah, we can mix points at this point.
Yeah, I mean, because I think that's the big thing about it is, I think that Warschewski and Malcolm Shaw are starting to build up a decent partnership. But Warschewski moves around the pitch a lot. And they look like they were setting up in sort of a 3-5, like a 5-3-2. So you've got 3 good centre midfielders in there. You've got 3 good centre backs. The wing backs get forward. They deliver good crosses. Warschewski and Shaw are big players, so they're good in the air. But Warschewski can move a little bit more around the pitch and receive the feet. If they do play them as 2 strikers, it could work, and it could improve what they do going forward. But I think, like you've mentioned, like throughout this season, like Warschewski's all over the pitch trying to be like the budget Harry Kane, and it ends up making Shaw a little bit isolated, and it takes some really impressive work from Warschewski to get the goals that he's got, rather than being sort of naturally in the positions to regularly get chances at goal.
Yeah, and that's why in the point that I want to talk about Warschewski is I do feel like he's the key to their attack. If they manage to sort of corral him into the right spaces, because as you mentioned, his movement and his instincts are so solid for a striker. You see in that first goal, the fact that he was able to pull away towards the back post and tuck that away. No one else was around him.
He's reacting quicker than everyone.
Exactly. His reactions were superb in that. And even as the match went on, he arguably should have had a second when that cross went in and it found him at the back post alone. And that was him moving into the middle and fading towards the back post before the cross went in. That's the kind of instinct that you need from a striker. And he's so one of the best things about him as a striker that is great for any striker is the spatial awareness. He sees what the players are around him. He sees the space around him. You saw that dummy that he did for Shaw, that Shaw was able to turn and shoot, and unfortunately he couldn't get a better purchase on the ball to really threaten the Ottawa's goal. But you see the way that Warschewski can sort of manipulate the space around, and he's German. That's something that the Germans love to do with their attackers. He could be that main man for Cavalry if they can corral him a little bit more so he's not as frantic, because we saw him out wide, we saw him drop deep, and for me every time I was like, cool, but stay up top because you're that guy. You're the guy
Yeah,
that
he's just going that
can
little
take
bit too far, isn't he, when he goes? It's like great to
exactly.
pick up those spots around, sure, but then he goes a little bit too far out.
And I was sort of wondering, is that a case of just maybe Warschewski trying to overdo it, or is he trying to make up for maybe movements that he feels like his teammates aren't doing? Maybe he feels like he
Mm,
has to go out wide or drop deep because some of his teammates aren't taking up those positions. I'm not saying it's all in Warschewski. I think that the team as well needs to be able to, the attack specifically, needs to be able to work with Warschewski better so that he doesn't feel like he has the need to go
mm,
out and take up those positions out wide or drop deep, that there will be players there that will be able to occupy those spaces so he can stay in those central channels. And yeah, he can drift left and right a bit going into the half spaces because he has the awareness to do so and he can exploit the spaces in between the defenders and create those chances. But he still needs to be in and around that central area
mm.
because that's where he's the most dangerous. And he
Yeah,
has the instinct. He can be a poacher, as we saw in that first goal, and he just needs to work maybe a little bit on his composure. Sometimes it feels like the shots they
yeah,
take are kind of a little bit wild and erratic. If he can get that under control, have a little bit more composure when he shoots, I genuinely feel like he'll be such a
mm,
dangerous striker for Cavalry. And in the system that they're playing, where they love to go out wide and cross balls into the box, and you have somebody like Fraser Aird, who's one of my favorite players in the league because he's like you talk about budget Harry Kane. He's like a budget Trent Alexander-Arnold with the crosses he does, those in swingers into the back post. That's what I feel like. There's where you need Orchowski to step up and be able to head home like he
yeah,
did a couple of times earlier this season. I feel like he just maybe lost his way. I think he's over trying to do it a bit too much. I feel like if you are able to, put him in the right spaces and tell him, "Don't worry, we got it."
mm,
Outside of here, he will be a really good threat for them moving forward. It might be that key to unlocking the goal scoring, the goal scoring ability from Cavalry FC that they desperately need if they
yeah.
want to climb up the table, similar to Pacific, but I don't think as drastic as Pacific. But we've harped on about Cavalry quite a bit. Let's talk about Ottawa, because Ottawa, the super team that they were at the beginning,
Yeah,
have been dropping off a little bit as of late. They only got one win in 5 in all competitions. They obviously lost last week, so they came back and they got a draw, a tough place to come, Atco Field
yeah,
against Cavalry, to get a draw. A lot of teams will take that as a win in and of itself. So I feel like, it's not, it's definitely an improvement, but it still felt like Ottawa were not at 100%. For me, like looking at the defensive side, they looked a little bit timid at
mm,
times. Warschewski was like, I was praising him, really good at reading the space. They were allowing him to have too much space, not only him, but also Malcolm Shaw getting some space. Lucas Diaz found a couple of gaps as well. I felt like Ottawa's defense wasn't as tight and as structured as they usually were. They weren't pressing as much as they usually were in this kind of new system that they have. They did, the team entirely hold possession really well. I think they had like 48% possession, which was the highest amount of possession they've ever had at Echo Field. So I really like that Carlos Gonzalez made his team come out and go toe to toe and say, we're
yeah,
not letting them just have the ball and we defend and look for the counterattacks, is what we might expected from Atletico Ottawa side years prior.
mm,
Now they're actually trying to go toe for toe, and it showed in this match, but still a little bit, timid is the word that I would say for the defense. In attack, they did look dangerous. They had a couple of chances, but it just felt like they missed a final effort. Del Campo was a little quiet this match. Tabla was misfiring. The biggest chance that they had after Zapater's goal was Aparicio with his kind of like chip cross that hit the crossbar.
yeah.
What did you feel was missing? If there was anything else aside from what I said that was missing from Ottawa and this match to make them, a little bit more dangerous and maybe more deserving of a winner.
Yeah, it's difficult. Like the sort of like this 4-4-2 they try to play with. Like, I mean, with Sissoko and Zapatero, I just don't think that's a great partnership for a
Mm.
4-4-2. Sissoko's been a bit erratic, good in stages, but a little chaotic at times.
Yeah.
Tabla, pure chaos, which is fun to watch, but they're just not getting any returns on like what he's bringing to the game. Del Campo's lost this little run of form, and I'm not sure how you can take last year's Golden Boot winner and just make them not goal dangerous at all. Like, there's something's changed in his team. Like Bassett, we started when he played that right wing at the first game of the season, and you see him change. You think, okay, right, we'll start to see the best of him again. But it's just never. It's not really kicked on, and there's just a weird thing about this team is that none of them seem like they have to take the game on their shoulders and go out and win it because they think there's great players around us. So it's all right, we'll get through this. And they're in this little stage now where Forge had it last year at the beginning of the year where Becker was getting the team in the back and saying, right, come on, let's play. Like, and he's surrounded by good players, but he's saying, come on, let's do this. Like, let's not make these little mistakes. Let's not try too much in certain areas. Let's just go out and win games and then build on that. Whereas I'm not seeing, I mean, Zapater's doing his best, I mean, backing in the goals, but I'm not seeing someone on this Cavalry team, Ottawa team that just says, right, come on, no, this is what we're doing. Let's just start, let's get ahead in this game and let's just manage it and then keep moving on and we'll get back and we'll start improving.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like that, you know what, Ottawa, because of how well they were playing, I don't know if Carlos Gonzalez, again, I think this is a curse that all of the managers have to deal with, and sometimes it has its drawbacks, is trying to change things up a little bit too much, because I really like the way that they started to play Ottawa in the early season. You had Chris Twardek and Matteo de Brienne just bombing down the sides with Tabla and Bassett kind of cutting inside into those half spaces and just causing chaos and overloading the wide areas and the central channels and just, basically bombarding the opposition's defensive area. And obviously, as much as I love it, I know it can't be fully sustainable, and I know you can't do it every game because eventually teams will be able to somewhat figure it out, and then you are more liable to conceding goals on the counterattack and defensive transitions. So I understand that you need to switch things up, but I feel like looking at that sort of starting 11, it felt like there was like that shouldn't be the way that they are playing. I also want to mention though, with the One Soccer graphic at the beginning of the match had Del Campo playing as one of the central midfielders, which is so very odd. I was like, who made that mistake? Somebody needs to reevaluate how they read the formations. But even still, like even when I figured out what their actual formation was, they kind of like it felt too rigid. It felt too pragmatic, and it felt like it didn't allow for a little bit of that chaos that Ottawa thrived in at the beginning of the season. You mentioned Tabla is pure chaos, but he's been subdued a little bit in the last little while, and I feel like it's because he hasn't had the space and the ability to, as much as in the previous games. You look at what Matteo de Brienne offers Tabla on the left side, because he's always overlapping. He's such a threat on the outside. Tabla has space in the middle because everyone's worried about the overlap, and so there's where he can cut in on his right and just create danger and be a threat in and of himself. I feel like there hasn't been as much of that in the last few weeks for Tabla specifically, and Ottawa's attack as well. And Del Campo was so good because he found in the midst of that chaos, he found those little pockets where he could get the ball, shoot, and score. It feels like this, so he hasn't been able to find that same sort of ability in these last few weeks of finding those little pockets. You saw the couple of shots and chances, they were from really, really tough areas to score. It's not like where he was before, where he found the spots in front of goal or just to the side of goal, or he took a touch into space and had a better look at goal. That's been lacking as well. So I think for me, that's what it's been an issue for me in Ottawa in the attack. Is there surprisingly there hasn't been enough chaos. I want more, attacking intent, more risks being taken and the like. And I feel like when you have that star quality, you need to be able to do that. And maybe that's what's made it seem like because the players are more focused on being in this rigid structure, no one's sort of taking responsibility and putting it on their shoulders, sort of like you mentioned. And we're left with a team that still is dangerous in the attack, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
They're not as dangerous as they were at the beginning of the season. And you make a great point about Bassett, because I haven't even thought of that, which I think is an issue in and of itself, that the Golden Boot winner has been so quiet in the attack. And we were talking about, maybe they were relying on him too much last season. Now I feel like they've completely stunted him. How do you see, is there a way that Carlos Gonzalez can sort of try to marry the two ideas of having Bassett be more involved while still allowing some freedom and some chaos from the other star players?
Yeah, I think they need to get him back in that sort of number 10 sort of position, and they've got to work ways around. It's got to accept that someone's going to have to. You've either got to leave Ollie Bassett not being like at the level he can play at, or you've got to sacrifice someone else. Like at this point, they've got little areas now where it's like, I'd have Zapatero back as a 6, so then he can sit in, make a back 3 while Debrienne and Tordek get high. You've got Bassett have and then have like the likes of Tabler moving around up the top, and just so Bassett can pick up little areas. But I just don't like him on the right. I just think they're making decisions, and it looks like Ollie Bassett's the one that's losing out on the decisions each time.
Yeah, and for a player of his quality and what he's been able to he's been able to consistently show for Atletico all one of the past seasons, that's a concern in of itself. I don't, when you're trying to change styles, there have to be some sacrifices made. I don't think Ollie Bassett should be a sacrifice for Ottawa in their new style. I think they need to find a way to be able to get him more involved and still maintain the quality that they have in the attack. But that's it for that match. Let's go to the fourth and final match, because we're running a little bit long now.
Yeah, there's a big game on for you, isn't there?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, at the time of recording, there's the
we'll rush through it. Don't worry.
Yeah. But the fourth game was Forge against Valor. Forge won 2-1 in this match. 2 goals by Kwasi Poku. Again, at striker. Again, killing it in the attack. But Valor did get one back through Binate. Finally, Binate got a goal. Even though Valor lost, I was just so happy that he got a goal.
Yeah.
He's been due one for weeks. So I was very happy for him. I mean, you couldn't have gotten an easier goal. Well, actually, you might have. And you might have missed it like Poma did at the end, but we'll talk about
exactly. Oh, yeah.
Might be up there for miss of the season. I don't know. Between him and Richie, I don't know which one was.
He'll have his move to Pacific at the end of the year.
Yeah. You know what? Yeah, that would fit.
I feel harsh. I really like Pacific, but it's just been embarrassing.
Yeah.
But Poku. Let's jump into Poku.
Yeah, let's talk about Forge, and let's talk about Poku, because Poku has made that center forward position his position to lose. Fantastic play all around in this match. A true center forward's performance, just in the way of his movement, his hold-up play, his determination. We've talked before about, like, as a striker, you got to be able to anticipate the defense messing up. Even if they don't mess up 99 times, you got to be on your toes so that when they mess up that one time, you can take advantage of that.
Yeah.
And Kwasi Poku did not just do that one time. He did that multiple times against Valor. Again, we'll talk about Valor and their mistakes in a little bit, but fantastic for Poku, because we had been talking about, it's like, okay, he's done well, but what happens when Jordan Hamilton and Terran Campbell come back in? Is he going to still be the striker? He needs to impress and show that on a consistent basis, he can be a good striker and not just a sort of impact player that you bring off the bench. This was the performance that I think solidified that for me.
Yeah.
Because you look at, the goals that he scored, especially the second goal. The second goal for me was that of Antonoglu, poor back pass, but what a way to capitalize on that, get on it, and then a superb finish, a little lob that hit the underside of the bar, went in, helped in. I think it was Mora that the ball already crossed the line, but he just thumped it in himself. Really, really solid strike from him. And then the first goal, incredible for just spatial awareness to stay on side. I think it was Alarcon that was keeping him on, even though he raised his hand. He raised his hand, even though he could see that he was onside. But for him to get it and then just quick turn and finish, really, really impressive all around. You saw the hold up play that he did to give Badibanga a chance. He kind of dribbled past 3 in the box, laid it off for Badibanga. Badibanga had a shot that wasn't powerful enough to really trouble Viscosi. And then you had the chance that he created by, again, capitalizing on a mistake and setting up Borges basically for a really good opportunity that unfortunately Borges skied. Looking at the performance overall, though, Mike, what did you make of Kwasi Poku's center forward play? Was that probably his most impressive performance, at least in the league so far? And do you think he solidified that the number 9 position?
Yeah, I mean, we talk about how managers are trying to change things and keep people happy and move things around, but I don't think you don't really want to when someone's in such full swing. Like, I imagine at the moment, if he continues playing anywhere like this, near like this, you just keep rolling with it. He's gone from that first game where we saw him get put there and we're like, oh, this is interesting, and you saw him do a little bit decent bits with the ball, but then his movement off the ball wasn't as great and things like that, because he looked like a player had been thrown into a new position. But it's night and day to what it is now, and it's only a short few weeks. It just looks like he's got a good understanding of what he's meant to be doing, and he's got the strength to go with it. He's got the speed to go with it, and he's definitely got the confidence at the moment. So it's really helping this team, and he just in fantastic form at the moment. He's not going to be playing left back anytime soon. It's hard to see Badibanga getting dropped. So yeah, he's looked at this and gone, yeah, I need to really make an impression here. Like, I've got to make this position mine. And at the moment, like, why would you take him out?
Yeah, no, I feel like I've given Bobby Smirniotis more than enough reason to keep it in that lineup. It's incredible to think that Forge's most lethal striker was playing like left back and left wing back last season, and that's what we were expecting. And remember when Parra was playing really well, we're like, where's Poku gonna play?
Exactly,
What happened with him? Apparently this is the answer. Just chuck him up front and see what he can do.
It's fun to see. Really fun when these little experiments start working.
Actually work. Yeah, that's great to see them pay off. But let's talk a little bit about your boys, Valor FC, because they had
quick, because I've ranted about this team a lot.
Yeah, you have, and I feel like we don't want to go over some of the same points about individual mistakes and errors at the back, so we'll focus on some other things. The one that you mentioned here on our notes was wide issues, or wide forwards being an issue for Valor. You saw Binate dropped and Faria kind of put in on that right winger. We still saw Hundal, be at sort of that left wing slot. For you, do you think, like, is that something that you think is a genuine option that might work for Phil Dos Santos, of sort of putting 3 strikers in at striker, left wing, and right wing, or what are the issues that you're seeing with these sort of wide forwards?
I think the biggest issue, and Binate got his goal, but when you see all 3 of them, when they're in possession and they get forced wide, they're not creative enough. They're not making the right moves. They're not beating players very often. And the more games go on, and they're relied upon, Jordan Swibble just gets isolated and doesn't get anything. And he's, I mean, for that centre forward, he's just waiting for the fullbacks to get the ball, because at the moment, like, other players aren't really they can't do anything in tight spaces, and Valor have got their issues and across different parts, but just to focus on that one, it's just they're not creative enough in how they're wanting to be used. it's another team where you just think actually maybe just go to 2 strikers and change it, like get those fullbacks, get Temi Antonoglu playing as a proper wing back, and give them something to do, because at the moment it just looks really disjointed. Just looks like strikers playing out wide who aren't wingers.
Which I know Sean Hundal has experienced
Yeah.
that before, so a little surprising that he's back at it again. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of issues going on in Valor right now that are kind of plaguing them. You could say that, obviously individual mistakes at the back, the giveaways that they were giving aren't helping themselves. But if you are going to be a team that is going to make those mistakes and concede those goals, then you gotta at a certain point be like, all right, let's just outscore the opponent. And I feel like when you have 3 strikers in these positions, if you're not getting the best out of all 3 of them, if you're struggling to find a way to stack up the attack so that you can have, players in the right positions, making the right movements, so you can create the space for those chances to score goals, then it makes it even more difficult for a team to get results, because if you can't score the goals and you're conceding the goals, well, there's only one possible outcome, and that's you're losing matches. So I feel like, as much as the defense is going to be something that Phil Dos Santos needs to address, I think it's a valid point to point out about the wide forwards and the attack in general, because you have wing backs that can be so dangerous in the wide areas. We've harped on and on and on about Temi Antonoglu. I think we've been waxing lyrical on him for weeks. Let him cook down the left side. Let him do that and find a way to just support him, instead of trying to, I don't know, it feels like a time like, because Sean Hundal doesn't understand his role that well, he sometimes is not giving that space for Antonoglu to really push up and attack that space in behind and be able to, deliver those really good crosses and balls into the box that he's become known for at Valor so far this season. So I think, it'll be something that Phil Dos Santos needs to work on. But last thing, though, I want to talk about before we close up with Forge is their performance overall, because while it was really strong for, I would say, 60, 70 minutes, the last 20 minutes, it was a little bit of concern, because they started the match very, very well. They, as you mentioned in the notes, they made Tim Horn's field huge. They opened up so many big gaps between the Valor defense and created a lot of passing lanes with ease. It made it seem like it was going to be a one-way traffic. For Forge, and it felt like that way. You look at the stats at the end of the first half. They had 63.4% possession. They had 7 shots and 0.96 expected goals just in the first half. And it wasn't just the way that they were holding onto the ball, it's the way they were set up off the ball as well. They were pressing Valor very high. That's what was forcing some of those mistakes. And they were really putting on a clinic in the opening 50, 60, 70 minutes. But then last 20 minutes, it just felt like they kind of ran out of gas. They kind of allowed Valor to come back into it. And it was a valiant, fight from Valor in the last 20 or so minutes to try to get back into it. They almost found the equalizer through Raphael Owen's laser shot that Kalongo had to basically palm onto the crossbar. But those last 20 minutes were kind of unforge-like. And it's been a trend I've seen to Forge. They haven't been able to be consistently solid across 90 minutes. They either start a bit poorly or they end a bit poorly. And sometimes that costs them goals, and sometimes that costs them results. Obviously, the late miss from Nana Poma, the one that he missed from 3 or 4 yards out, doesn't make it look any better. But do you think this is something of concern for Bobby Smirniotis and his side? The fact that there will be 15, 20-minute periods where he can't, get the best of his players, and he doesn't have that sort of organizational structure that we're used to having, just dominating the ball, finding the spaces, and defending resolutely?
Yeah, I'm not sure. It's really tough because Ford played so well and they still come away with the points. But maybe there's a time where Bobby needs to look at who are my starters and who are my finishers. Like, who are the best players to start a match? Who are the best players to kill it? Like at the end of the game, and do I need to start, like, rather than just going, this is my best 11, this is what I'll have to start with? Does he look at some other players and think, actually, like, maybe you'll be better coming on in certain games in the last half hour and really affecting it in those areas? Maybe he needs to start having a look at some of the like minor tweaks, maybe, like, not, I mean, we've bashed some people are making such big tweaks all day and having to rotate. But I think maybe Forge could look at doing some really minor things with that and sort of saying, okay, it's not dropping a player, but it's changing their role by bringing them in later in the game to really affect it. And whether that might be a way of sort of trying to be like as productive as they can throughout the entire 90 minutes.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, it's really just game management. And if you can try to find, maybe like you mentioned, different players to bring off the bench to properly kill off a game, to be more, resolute in the final stages, or, choosing the right players to start off a game, to, start really brightly and not, start flat footed. Like there's been a couple times this season where we've seen Forge play like that.
Yeah.
Maybe that will be the way that Bobby Smirnios will be able to improve the performance just that little bit better, because it's not like they're playing badly now, but it's these little things that might be the difference between first and second or second and third at the end of the season. And then, playoffs happen, and then that's its own competition for Forge.
Yeah. Exactly.
But yeah, that is it. Thank you so much for listening to the recap, or not recap, for the review, I guess, for the takeaway review from this from the CPL's Match Week 11. Make sure to follow us once again on all of our socials at Coast to Coast FC, so you can give us your thoughts on this week's episode. Do you like this new format? Do you think there's something else that we can add to kind of keep things fresh and make it more entertaining for you listeners to be able to stay engaged and listen on a more frequent basis? Let us know, and we will be more than happy to implement any suggestions that you may have. But until next time, I'm Felipe Ojo.
And I'm Mike Royce.
And this has been Coast to Coast FC, signing out.